All right, so in our last video then, we created our first breakpoint, which was 998 pixels and below. We are suggesting that in our style sheet, that is the default, so that is what everything is going to receive unless we tell the browser something accordingly. What we've decided to do is go from larger to smaller. So with our responsive style sheet, we said if you go smaller than 998 pixel viewport size, then override our prior settings when we had column 1, column 2, and column 3, override these settings in conflict. So in other words, the margin right will still remain because we haven't overwritten the margin right. We have overwritten the widths, however, and so now we're saying no longer will you be a width of 30% column 1 and column 2, you'll now be a width of 45. So recognize it's still going to be having the float right, and it's still going to have the margin right applied because we're just overwriting if we get smaller. So now let's add the next viewport size. I'm going to continue on putting my responsive styles on my responsive styles page, and again progressively going from larger viewport sizes down to smaller viewport sizes. So I'm going to do the next smaller viewport size, which is going to media screen. We're not doing print, we're going to do a screen, and we're going to do our max. This time we're going to do max width. We're going to do a 768 pixel breakpoint. All right, and so in this breakpoint, what we're going to be doing is we have, remember, open and close a curly brace. So everything inside this open and closing curly braces is going to receive, is going to be applied if the screen is 768 pixels and below. So just like we've done with all of our other styles, all of our open and closing curly braces have to be contained within the open and I have a hard time with that word, closing curly braces of our media query. And so now what we're going to do is on our second breakpoint, the idea was that we were going to, let's see, we did our images. Now we're going to work on that main content. So now the idea is we're going to take this content, which if you look at your CS or your HTML, it's got a class of main content, and this is contained in a section that is called, well, let's look at it. So anyway, I don't remember offhand, but we're going to go look. And so the idea now is this section is going to take up the full width, and the container, the section that is containing these two colored boxes, is going to come down below and take up the full width. So let's see how that works. So first we figure out what those classes are called. So I'm going to scroll down because I totally stumbled over that. So that first section is a class main content. So that's one portion of it. We need to address this main content and have it stretch 100%. So let's just do that. So I'm going to take that main content. Remember, I'm accessing the class by utilizing the period. So main content, I'm going to spell content correctly. And in that main content, we're going to make that width 100%. And let's just see what it was we're overwriting here. So if I look in my style sheet and I find main content somewhere here, there it is. So main content currently had a width of 65%. It was floated to the left and it had a margin of right. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to overwrite these two properties, and we're going to say we'll give it a width of 100%, so it'll overwrite the 65, and we'll say float none. In other words, we don't want you to float anymore. So let's look and see if we've got progress there. So if I refresh this page and then go below our breakpoint, which we set at 576, let's just verify that. Okay, so now let's see what happened. Okay, we'll deal with this in a moment, but we can definitely see something happen because this is now on the next line. Our main content is definitely taking up 100%. So we're on the right track, but now let's deal with this silly looking thing. All right, so let's see what that silly looking thing is called. That silly looking thing is called the sidebar. So inside the class sidebar, we have two sections, each with their own class. So one section with the class sidebox 1 is our blue box, and one is our yellow box. And so if we look at our blue box and our yellow box, they are still taking up, let's see, side box 1, side box 2. All right, so our sidebar, which is this class, is taking up 30%, which is why we see that it is squished here in the 30%. So that's why it's RNA. In fact, let's look at our div tools. So I'm going to right click. I'm not going to right click. Thought I was going to right click. I can't do it in here. All right. So let's just keep going. So trust me then that this is taking up 30%. For some reason, I can't get in my dev tools to prove that, but that's taking up 30%. Oh, you're right clicking here. That's why. Let's see if we can right click here. Nope, it's going to do it over here. All right. Anyway, so that sidebar is taking up 30%, and we want to make some changes. So we're going to say instead, sidebar, we'd like you to, instead of taking up 30%, take up the full 100%. And it had a float left, so let's just make sure that it's not floating at all, and we'll get rid of that float. So now if I refresh our page, we are now getting that sidebar is taking up 100%, and therefore the elements inside are also taking up 100%. All right, so we're going to add one more viewport, and that one more breakpoint, and the next breakpoint is going to stack these columns, these images with their text on top of each other. So instead of these images now, these image columns being floated side by side, we're going to have each of these take up 100%. So let's deal with that next. All right, so this is 768. Let's make one smaller. Media, we're going to do screen and max width. We're going to go 576 pixels this time. And now what we're going to be dealing with is column 1, column 2, and column 3. So that's these three images. Column 1 and column 2 currently are taking up 45%. Column 3 is taking up 100%. So we can pretty much just override these two, right? We can say column 1 and column 2. They need a period in front. Instead of taking up 45%, let's have you all take up 100%. Okay, so let's see if that works. So we're at 576 pixels. So 576 pixels, let's refresh and see what happens. Perfect. So now those columns are taking up 100%, 100%, 100%. That looks good. And just for kicks and giggles, just so we can see that we can do it, sometimes on a phone, because that's sort of what we're working on here, right, is a viewport size for a phone. We don't want our users, maybe we take away some data, some things that are showing up because it's just too much for a phone version. So let's just for practice take away one of our little boxes here, just so you can see that it can be done. So in this same media query, let's do the side box 1, which will be our blue box. So we're going to make our blue box go away. Side box, it's -1. And the way you can do that is if you use the property display and the value of none, you're saying remove that from the page. So let's see if that happens. So now we're going to come back here, refresh, and in fact we see that happen. So we have now effectively gone from a desktop version where we had something that looks good on a desktop, and then we made some breakpoints so that as different viewports, which are different device sizes that we have no idea who's looking at our site, we'll be able to still see some nice content laid out nicely. Then when we go smaller, and then finally our smallest version would be like on a phone, everything's stacked. And in fact, then we got rid of some extraneous stuff. So, all right, that is responsive design in a style sheet or two.